Trump's tariff war with Canada was supposed to be his ultimate power move, crushing America's northern neighbor into submission while making himself look like the ultimate dealmaker. But something unexpected is happening. Instead of begging for mercy, Canada is quietly repositioning itself away from American dependence, and Trump's own desperation for a deal is starting to show. This isn't the story Trump wanted to tell, and it's definitely not going according to his script. To understand how we got here, we need to rewind to when Trump first unleashed his trade war on Canada. In July 2025, Trump slapped brutal tariffs on Canadian goods, 35% on most products, and a crushing 50% on Canadian steel. The message was clear: bow to American demands or watch your economy crumble. Trump expected Canada to fold quickly, just like he thought Ukraine would surrender to Russia in days, but neither country got the memo. The numbers tell a devastating story for Canadian industries. Steel and aluminum exports have plummeted under Trump's punishing tariffs. Thousands of manufacturing jobs have been lost. Michael Garcia, CEO of Algoma Steel, told CBC that the 50% tariff has effectively closed the U.S. market to us. His company, like many others, has been forced to scramble for alternatives as Trump's economic warfare takes its toll. But here's where Trump's plans started to unravel. Instead of capitulating, Canadian companies began doing something that probably keeps Trump awake at night. They started looking elsewhere. Industry Minister Mélanie Joly revealed a stunning example. Aluminerie Alouette, a Quebec aluminum manufacturer, sent just 4% of its exports to Europe in the first quarter. By the second quarter, that figure had skyrocketed to 57%. So we're seeing diversification of markets working, Joly said with obvious satisfaction. This is Trump's worst nightmare, a world where countries don't need America as much as America needs them. For decades, Canada has been one of America's most reliable trading partners, sending the vast majority of its exports south of the border. But Trump's aggressive tactics are forcing a fundamental shift that could permanently reshape North American trade relationships. The irony is thick. Trump positioned himself as the master negotiator who would use tariffs to extract better deals for America. Instead, he's pushing one of America's closest allies to reduce their economic dependence on the United States. It's like burning down your neighbor's house to force them to buy your fire insurance. Except now they're moving to a different neighborhood entirely. While Canadian businesses were quietly adapting to the new reality, Prime Minister Mark Carney was playing a much more sophisticated game than Trump seemed to realize.
That's our senior political correspondent, Michael Couture. Our front bench is set to talk about this, as well as Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer, who will join me live in studio in a few moments. Right now, though, I want to turn to a different but equally significant and developing story. There's a battle brewing in Western Canada that feels like it's almost at a fever pitch. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith wants a new bitumen pipeline to BC's coast, but BC's Premier says no way nor how. Here's Premier Smith on this program last night.
He began it, and I hope he dials his rhetoric back, because I'll be very frank about what I think of premiers who are trying to block other premiers from getting their products to market. So I would say that I think he went a little bit far yesterday. I hope he's regretting it. I know he's been ratioed quite badly on his video, which is a suggestion to me that he's not expressing the views of British Columbians.
That's Alberta's Premier on this program last night. Tonight, we are joined by British Columbia Premier David Eby, who is with us live, I believe, close to the legislature or maybe inside it. Premier, a pleasure to have you back on the program. Thank you for making the time.
Thanks for having me. I'm right here in the basement of the BC legislature right now.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks for carving out some time for this. Look, I've listened to your comments over the past number of days very closely, and I wanted to start off by asking you why you are so upset about something that you yourself have said is not, quote, real, non-existent, and fictional.
His second visit to the White House in October 2025 revealed the complex dynamics at play. Despite months of negotiations and what both leaders described as positive and optimistic discussions, no concrete deal emerged on sectoral tariffs or broader trade agreements. The meeting itself revealed everything you need to know about the power dynamic. Trump, desperate to look like he was winning, lavished praise on Carney in a way that bordered on the ridiculous. He's a world-class leader, Trump gushed. He could represent me anytime. This from the same man who regularly insults world leaders and threatens to annex entire countries. Carney's response was perfect. When Trump said he could represent him anytime, Carney made a scribbling gesture and told reporters, "Write that down." It was a masterclass in diplomatic chess, letting Trump think he was dominating while actually exposing his desperation for validation and a deal. Trump's language during the meeting was telling. He talked about mutual love between the countries and acknowledged Canada's work on issues like fentanyl trafficking. This was a far cry from his usual bombastic threats and insults. Kellyanne Shaw, a former Trump trade advisor, noticed the shift. This was as positive of a tone as I've seen him take with anyone. But the most revealing moment came when Trump tried to explain why no deal had been reached yet. He claimed there was a natural conflict because both countries want the same industries, cars and steel. The problem we have is that they want a car company and I want a car company, Trump said, sounding more like a petulant child than a president. Carney pushed back gently, correcting Trump's conflict language by saying the countries merely compete. It was a subtle but important distinction, one that reframed the entire discussion from Trump's zero-sum worldview to a more mature understanding of international trade. The real genius of Carney's approach became clear in what he didn't do. He didn't grovel. He didn't make desperate concessions. Instead, he offered something Trump couldn't resist, the promise of massive investment. Carney suggested Canada could make up to $1 trillion in investments in the U.S. over 5 years, but crucially, this wasn't presented as a concession. It was presented as an opportunity. Canadian officials stayed behind to continue the complex negotiations, with Industry Minister Melanie Joly confirming work on deals for steel, aluminum, and energy projects.
So listen, I won't go into the details of the negotiation. What you heard from the Prime Minister is at this point is we're looking to have a deal on steel, aluminum, and also energy projects. So this is what is being worked on. But we know also that we need one on auto, and we need one on copper, and we need one also on lumber, because these are all tariff industries. So we're going into an approach where we are doing one at a time. But at the same time, we will continue to fight for our auto workers. That's clear.
I do want to, though, based on what you just said, in combination with what we heard from Howard Lutnick, ask you about the prospect of one. I understand that you don't want to, disclose the details of the negotiations, but do I take from what you just said and what we heard from the Prime Minister that there won't be any deal on autos anytime soon? Howard Lutnick was pretty much explicit that Canada, he said, should come second to the United States, that maybe they'll continue buying parts, but nothing really beyond that. Is that your understanding? And if so, how consequential is that?
Well, I think the only person in the U.S. administration.
She emphasized the need to fight for Canadian auto workers, despite U.S. Commerce Secretary's comments limiting prospects. The minister stressed that President Trump is the ultimate decision maker, not his officials, maintaining hope for broader agreements. The opposition was quick to pounce on this apparent failure.
His platform, did he promise to give $1 trillion of our investment dollars to the Americans?
I would like to inform the Leader of the Opposition that there is a thing called the private sector. The private sector makes decisions about investment. The private sector, with the best deal in the world, will invest in this country, and we will build Canada strong.
How can he sit right there? Well, the U.S. Commerce Secretary just came out and said the 25% tariffs will stay in place. Despite the Prime Minister's concession after concession, he backed down on counter tariffs, backed down on the DST. Yesterday offered $1 trillion of Canadian investment money, and still he can't win anything from our auto workers. What does he say to those thousands of auto workers that are out of work because of his weakness?
What we have at this point with the United States for the auto sector is the lowest tariff in the world, less than 10%, less than 10%, lower than Europe, lower than Korea.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre attacked Carney in Parliament, highlighting 86,000 job losses and accusing him of pathetically going to the White House to offer a $1 trillion gift. He characterized the Prime Minister as bowing before the President in weakness, using the lack of concrete results to paint a picture of failed leadership. Poilievre's attacks missed the point entirely. This wasn't a concession, it was bait. Carney was dangling the prospect of Canadian investment to keep Trump engaged while Canadian companies quietly reduced their dependence on American markets. The meeting ended exactly as Carney probably hoped it would, with no deal, but with Trump convinced that progress was being made. Trump promised that Canada would walk away very happy, but no tariff relief materialized. Instead, the impression of ongoing negotiations continued while the real work of economic diversification proceeded back home. This is where Trump's fundamental misunderstanding of economics becomes clear. He views trade as a zero-sum game where one side must lose for the other to win. But modern economies are interconnected webs where aggressive actions often backfire in unexpected ways. The auto sector provides a perfect example of this disconnect.
I think what we heard from the secretary, we've been hearing in Washington for months, and we understand those bold aspirations, but sometimes they run up against the rules of physics and their own self-interest. And I think in the case of automotive, some of the notional claims of moving manufacturing to the United States is not going to happen. But we do need to get on with the negotiations around reducing the tariffs in these Section 232 sectoral tariffs. And steel and aluminum are a good place to start. It seems the federal government is taking a couple of bites at a time. And I know they have indicated there's more to come. But for the people working in the auto sector, we need to know that we're going to continue working on that area too.
Mr. Cooper, let me ask you more broadly.
David Patterson, Ontario's Washington representative, explains that while the Trump administration has disruptive aspirations about moving manufacturing to the U.S., these plans run up against the rules of physics and their own self-interest. Canada buys 30 to 35% of all U.S. vehicle exports and 75% of heavy-duty trucks, making retaliation economically devastating for American workers. By trying to bully Canada into submission, Trump is actually accelerating Canada's efforts to reduce its economic dependence on the United States. The steel industry provides another perfect example. Michael Garcia from Algoma Steel acknowledged that even if tariffs were reduced to 10 to 15%, could we win back all the business we lost under 50%? No, I don't think so. Some of that business is very difficult to recover. Once supply chains are disrupted and new relationships are formed, they don't easily revert to their original patterns. This is the hidden cost of Trump's trade war that doesn't show up in his victory speeches. Every Canadian company that finds a European buyer, every supply chain that gets rerouted away from American markets, every relationship that gets damaged by his aggressive tactics, these are permanent changes that will outlast his presidency. Meanwhile, Trump is facing his own economic pressures. The American economy benefits enormously from Canadian resources and trade. Canada is America's largest source of imported energy, a crucial supplier of critical minerals, and a major market for American goods and services. Pushing Canada away doesn't just hurt Canada, it hurts American consumers and businesses too. The lumber industry is a perfect example. Trump has threatened 10% tariffs on Canadian lumber, but this will primarily hurt American home builders and consumers who rely on Canadian wood products. It's like shooting yourself in the foot to prove you're tough, except the bullet ricochets and hits you in the other foot too. Carney seems to understand this dynamic perfectly. By not rushing to accept whatever scraps Trump might offer, he's forcing the American president to confront the reality that Canada has options. The longer the trade war drags on, the more entrenched these alternative relationships become, and the less leverage Trump actually has. The diversification strategy that Jolie highlighted isn't just about aluminum companies finding European buyers. It's about fundamentally restructuring Canada's economic relationships to be less vulnerable to American political volatility. This is a long-term strategic shift that will have implications far beyond Trump's presidency. Trump's response to this challenge has been predictably erratic. One moment he's praising Carney as a world-class leader, the next he's insisting that tariffs will remain in place. He talks about mutual love while maintaining policies that are actively damaging the relationship. It's the behavior of someone who knows he's losing control of the narrative but doesn't know how to regain it. The real test of Trump's strategy will come with the mandatory review of the U.S.-Canada-Mexico agreement scheduled for next year. Trump has already signaled ambivalence about preserving the trilateral deal, suggesting he might prefer bilateral agreements instead. But this threat might have less impact than he thinks if Canadian companies have already diversified their markets. Industry experts are watching this dynamic with fascination. Inu Manak from the Council on Foreign Relations noted that it makes a difference to have face-to-face time with Trump, but the question is whether personal charm can overcome fundamental economic forces. Trump may enjoy Carney's company, but that doesn't change the fact that his tariffs are pushing Canada toward other partners. The broader implications of this trade war extend far beyond North America. Other countries are watching how Canada responds to American economic pressure, and the lessons are clear. Diversification is the best defense against economic bullying. If America's closest ally can reduce its dependence on U.S. markets, any country can. This is perhaps the most damaging aspect of Trump's approach. By using trade as a weapon, he's teaching the world that economic relationships with America come with political strings attached. Countries are learning that they need alternatives to American markets, American technology, and American financial systems. This is the opposite of the America First outcome Trump claims to want. The irony is that Trump's tactics might have worked in an earlier era when America had overwhelming economic dominance. But in today's multipolar world, countries have options. The European Union, Asia, and other markets offer alternatives that didn't exist decades ago. Trump is fighting the last century's trade wars with this century's tools, and the results are predictably counterproductive. Carney's patient approach is paying dividends in ways that might not be immediately obvious. By refusing to panic or make desperate concessions, he's demonstrating that Canada can weather Trump's economic assault. This sends a powerful message to other countries facing similar pressure. You don't have to surrender to American demands just because Trump raises his voice. The aluminum example that Jolie cited is particularly significant because it shows how quickly these shifts can happen. In just one quarter, a major Canadian company redirected the majority of its exports from American to European markets. Multiply this across dozens of industries and hundreds of companies, and you're looking at a fundamental restructuring of North American trade relationships. Trump's supporters might argue that any deal is better than no deal, but this misses the larger strategic picture. The longer Trump maintains his aggressive stance, the more time Canadian companies have to establish alternative relationships. Every month that passes makes it harder for Trump to use economic leverage effectively because Canada becomes less dependent on American markets. The psychological aspect of this conflict is equally important. Trump built his political brand on being a master dealmaker who could intimidate opponents into submission. But Carney isn't playing that game. He's polite, professional, and patient. Exactly the kind of approach that frustrates bullies who depend on emotional reactions to maintain their advantage. When Trump talks about natural conflict between the countries, he's revealing his zero-sum mentality. But when Carney corrects this to competition, he's demonstrating a more sophisticated understanding of how modern economies work. Countries can compete in some areas while cooperating in others. It's not all or nothing. This difference in worldview might explain why Trump seems so frustrated with the Canadian relationship. He's used to dealing with leaders who either capitulate quickly or fight back aggressively. Carney's measured response doesn't fit either category, leaving Trump unsure how to respond effectively. As this trade war drags on, the fundamental question becomes, who has more to lose? Trump needs to show his base that his tough tactics work, but the evidence suggests they're backfiring. Canada is adapting and diversifying, while American consumers and businesses bear the costs of higher prices and disrupted supply chains. The steel industry's struggles illustrate this perfectly. Canadian steel companies are finding new markets while American manufacturers face higher costs for raw materials. Trump's tariffs are essentially a tax on American businesses that use steel, funded by American consumers who pay higher prices for finished products. Meanwhile, Carney continues to play the long game. He's making the right diplomatic noises about cooperation and mutual benefit while quietly supporting the economic diversification that reduces Canada's vulnerability to future American pressure. It's exactly the kind of strategic thinking that Trump's impulsive approach lacks. The real winner in this trade war might be the European Union and other markets that are gaining Canadian business at America's expense. Every Canadian export that gets redirected away from American markets is a victory for America's competitors. Trump's trade war isn't just failing to help America, it's actively helping America's rivals. This is the hidden tragedy of Trump's approach. Instead of strengthening American economic relationships, his aggressive tactics are teaching the world to reduce their dependence on American markets. It's the economic equivalent of burning bridges and then wondering why you're stuck on an island. As we look toward the future, the lessons of this trade war will extend far beyond the specific issues of steel tariffs and lumber prices. Countries around the world are learning that economic diversification is the best defense against political pressure. America's closest allies are becoming its most motivated students in this lesson. Trump's tariff trap was supposed to force Canada into submission, but instead it's forcing Canada toward independence. And that might be the most expensive lesson Trump never intended to teach.